Hi, leaders. It's Travis Daumert. If you were not able to join us in Houston yesterday, I do still want to share with you some of the takeaways from the conversation that we had. And so I'm going to walk through the slides. You're welcome to download them, and you can also follow up with me. So at the end, if you wanted to, you could jump right to the end. There are QR codes in there for connecting with me on LinkedIn or sending me an email. So if you weren't able to be there and you've got a question, you can reach out to me. If you were there and you're watching it or you're reviewing it with your team and you want to come back and ask something else, please do. The real topic here of conversation is how do we build a high performance culture? But I think what you're going to find is I'm probably going to spend more time convincing you that we need to do this and that there's actually a particular kind of high performance culture. We call it a people first high performance culture. But the idea is how do we help people experience winning both at work and at home by creating a work environment that encourages people to do their best work and live their best lives. And the world needs it. So let's dive in and talk a little bit about how this conversation went yesterday. If you don't know me, then that's great. It's nice to meet you. I'm Senior Vice President of Talent at One Digital. I've been here for the last almost 4 years, focused on helping us attract and retain the very best folks that we can find. And really developed a number of sort of contrarian views on these sort of talent related topics of talent acquisition, talent management, learning and development, and culture. And one of those, if I don't mention it later, I'll say now, is I really encourage leaders to stop trying to retain their people. Yes, it's part of my job. That's how I'm measured is, are we retaining folks? But when that is your goal, when you go to work trying to retain people, they can feel often that you're not fighting for their highest and best good. You're fighting to keep them there. And that is not necessarily the most effective strategy, especially not if cost matters to you. So we'll talk a little bit about the economics of growth versus retention. But anyway, in my background, I'm not a career HR person. So I'm still learning the HR game. If I misspeak, feel free to jump in, correct me, or let me know. I've been working in corporate HR teams for about the last 8 years, but started my career in consulting. From consulting, got into staffing and ran several staffing companies, primarily healthcare staffing, and then a very brief and interesting sort of journey through domestic staffing, working with ultra high net worth families and helping them try to create a Ritz-Carlton experience at home. Turns out Ritz-Carlton was a very formative company in my life and in my education. I studied them in business school. I ended up getting to know a lot of Ritz-Carlton people, learned from them, adopted a lot of their people practices, and primarily because it appealed to me as an engineer. I have an engineering degree, not an HR degree, and I loved their pursuit of quality and how they attacked service quality and people processes as a way of consistently delivering great experiences, both for their guests and for their people. I spent about 5 years working in performance and accountability. This was primarily focused on sales and leadership teams. But what was interesting is we were trying to help people develop high performance habits. And we learned that most people cannot do that. They can't do it on their own. At least they're not good at it. And so we ended up studying soldiers and athletes for insights into how do people do hard things every day when most people don't. And perhaps one of the biggest takeaways was, wow, even if you're studying Navy SEALs, fighter pilots, Olympic athletes, when they leave their unit and they go into the world of work, they often struggle. And it's not because they changed. It's because the workplace changed. And so that work ultimately convinced me that if we really want to achieve our potential in work and life, we need a team. We need a place to go every day that helps us get better. And I believe that is the promise of great workplaces. So a couple other notes down there. I'm a recovering endurance athlete. Chased my wife, Lisa, most of my adult life. I met her when I was 19, and she's a fantastic runner, which turned me into a marathoner and triathlete. And then we started the endurance parenting. So we have 5 children, 4 teenagers, which is keeping life very full. All right, enough about me. Here's what we want to accomplish in this session. If we are successful, 4 things. The first one is to make sure all of us, not just HR leaders, all leaders need to be versed on the headwinds in the labor market. Things are very challenging out there, and they present an existential crisis for our organizations if we're not aware and we're not fighting this battle and getting ahead of it. We're going to talk about 4 elements of building a high-performance culture. I believe if you put these 4 elements in place, you have the potential to have a destination employer, how to stand out from the crowd. And you do need to compete not just with your competition, but with all companies. We are all in the people business. We're going to talk about which 3 of those 4 are essential that your leadership team tackle them, that you not try to outsource them. And then finally, I want to make sure that everybody ends this session with at least one thing they know they could do that's going to elevate the people and the performance in their organization. All right, we started out talking a little bit about attention that I know our leaders feel, a lot of people in the room felt, and they believe that a lot of you feel as well. And that is making decisions every day between doing what's right for our people and what's right for our business. And if that is you, if you have felt that tension at times, it makes sense because often we have goals around driving growth as well as driving bottom line performance. We also have goals today with driving retention and also trying to minimize burnout. It is nearly out of control. It is a wildfire in the labor market right now. And if you feel that and you feel pressure and tension every day, there's probably a good reason, because these things get at odds. If you have goals in more than 2 of these buckets, then you probably have goals that are in tension with each other. Driving our revenue growth often means, how do we do more work, more great work, but nonetheless, how do we add more to our list of things to do? And that potentially is competing with burnout. When we've got burnout, the number 1 reason for burnout in the labor force today is overload. People are overwhelmed and feel like they cannot keep up with the amount of things they're expected to do. Now, the flip side is spend. When we're trying to drive bottom line financial results, we are often trying to minimize what we're spending. When we're trying to drive retention, we typically think, oh my gosh, we've got to invest. And we've often really feel compelled that we've got to keep up with compensation. We'll talk a little bit about that. So the tension that you're feeling, totally understandable. What I believe is if you build a high-performance culture, a place where you prioritize people doing their best work and living their best lives, you can actually solve all 4 of these at the same time. Now, that is going to shock some people, and it may rub them the wrong way. Like, wait a minute, no, we absolutely have to take care of the business. The golden rule of business is that the one with the gold makes the rules. Well, this worked for a long time. This is how often we made decisions on whether or not we're going to pass along raises or bonuses, whether or not we're going to invest in people's retirement plan, match their 401k, or offer them better benefits, or decorate our office. Is we said, you know what, we're going to do the best we can for our people up to the point that it threatens our business results. And at the end of the day, it is just business. And in business, just business means sometimes I've got to look at the finances, not what people want. And I would tell you, I understand that. However, if that is how you're still thinking, you may be in trouble. If any of you are CFOs watching this, you may have heard the same lesson a long time ago that I heard in my first corporate finance class, and that was this: there is one golden rule in finance, and that is cash is king. You run out of cash, you're dead. Well, in today's labor market, this didn't occur right away, but about 10 years after I got out of business school, I learned some new rules. And one of those was that if you run out of talent, you're dead. And if you're running out of talent, it is because people are choosing to go somewhere else. They believe somewhere else is the next best opportunity for this next season of their lives. And your gold may not help you. Now, in the past, you could always find somebody. You could play with the wage until you finally got somebody to accept it. We are leaning into a future that looks different, where the labor market is not growing and our demands for people are. So we really have to think differently about this idea of a golden rule. What do people need to perform? Now, I did a quiz or a survey during our session, and I asked, how relevant are these topics to each of our guests? And this is where they came out. The first one was, our leaders are well-versed in the war for talent. You'll hear me refer to that quite a bit. And overall, there was a mixed bag, but on average, we think yes. I think our leaders are fairly well-versed in the war for talent. We have a clear and compelling EVP. If you're wondering what an EVP is, I hope you didn't mark this one too high. It stands for Employee Value Proposition. And here, there were kind of 2 modes. There was low and there was fairly high. So the average came out in the middle. But by saying clear and compelling, I would ask, can you articulate why people should come work at your company in less than 10 words? And if I go ask 10 more people on your team, will they use the same words? So it's one thing to have one. It's another for people to know it, believe it, and say it. If they're not, it's really hard for them to do it. So EVP is becoming really critical. Our people are doing their best work and living their best lives. This is a great barometer, and we're at sort of the meh stage here, kind of in the middle. And that's not uncommon. In fact, we're going to talk about some of the what's going on in the labor force to say actually 3 looks pretty darn good. Finally, our leaders feel torn between doing what is best for the business and what's best for our people. And overall, people are saying, yeah, I kind of feel that way. Very, very few people disagreeing with that statement. So I hope the rest of our talk is relevant. All right, so we did a little fact check. When was the war for talent coined? And if you're not familiar with it, I drew a couple of people in with the 1700s. I thought they actually might know something I don't know, but this specifically came from some work that McKinsey did, and it began in 1997. It was a 5-year study. Ultimately, they published a book on it in 2001. So I don't know that the study was quite done, but this was a pretty expansive study. It continued to grow. They republished the results again 11 years later in 2012. I would say it's probably time again. For all I know, McKinsey's working on this now, but it's been another 11, 12 years. And what I understand from looking at what's going on in the world of work, there's still a lot of work to do. But the war for talent really said, we have a problem coming. And they saw this by 2000. They were looking at 1980 census data. And what we saw then was this echo boom. So we had the Great Generation. They came back from the war and they had a lot of kids, and that became the boomers. And that was this big bulge. And then the boomers, by 1980, we could see they are starting to come of age. They're getting there. The oldest are at about 25 years old, and they were not having as many kids. So by 2000, when McKinsey was doing this data, they realized, uh-oh, we're going to have fewer workers in the years to come. In fact, what they were making was a 20-year prediction. Why? Because we don't make new workers. We make new babies. And when you see how many babies are born in a year, you know what the labor market's going to look like in 18 to 20 years. And they saw it was going to be smaller. So by the time you get to 2020, we have this flattening, shallowing out of our labor force. We're not having as many kids. What we didn't know is that a bunch of complicating factors were going to change labor markets even more. And one of those was wealth transfer. So the boomers have been the most productive and largest generation we've ever had in history of the world. They've accumulated $84 trillion in assets. And when they pass some of those down in large amounts, it can change people's motivation for work. And so that's considered an emerging trend right now as they're retiring, as they're actually getting older in age and even passing on, is that those assets are in flow and they're flowing down to younger kids, children and grandchildren, which may cause people to want to retire early, may cause them to have less motivation to work. Regardless of wealth transfer, we've had differing opinions for work now for about the last 40 years. So we've seen a big cut in career development, talent development, because people weren't staying at jobs long enough to justify those investments, or at least that's what we think. I'm going to argue with that. But we saw gig work take off with technology, the ability to have multiple part-time jobs. I don't need an employer. I am my employer. I'll go find the work when I want it. The opioid epidemic. Well, just introducing this drug into the world, it's wiped out tens of thousands of workers. And video games. Kind of interesting that the real explosion in time spent video gaming correlates to a decrease in time spent working. And so particularly for part-time workers, we've seen that part of the labor market participation erode. So anyway, we knew we were going to have fewer people. We didn't know that those fewer people were going to be less motivated to work or less motivated to stay with their employer. So things are rough. And this is the result. You see GDP growth has consistently come down. You see the population growth coming down. The labor force growth, it's still positive. So we're not shrinking the number of people because we do have immigration, we do have some other things going on. But the expected growth in our labor force for the next 10 years is 0.5%. If you are planning to grow your organization faster than that, or you need people to grow your organization at a rate faster than that, you are going to have a talent strategy. You are going to have to win people away from other companies. So this is unfortunately, for the time being, a fairly fixed game, and you are going to have a compelling value proposition to get people to leave what they're doing and come work for you. So if we were to kind of recap here, this is not going away. This is generational trends, not economic trends. So generational trends, they take decades. We're looking at labor force struggles for the next 30 to 50 years. Attitudes toward work are changing, so people are very readily leaving if they're not getting what they need. And now you can get hired from anywhere, by anyone, anywhere. So regardless of what you are doing with remote and hybrid work, if somebody wants remote work, there is somebody out there offering it, and they are coming for our people. So kind of dire. I'm afraid that I don't start out with a lot of good news. We are going to talk about how do we win, but what this often causes a lot of our leaders to think is, okay, so if we have to give in to the needs of our people, does that mean we have to actually like give up on some of the performance in our business? Do we have to accept lower margins? Do we have to accept that the costs are just going to be higher and that output is going to be lower if we're going to attract and retain talent? I'm happy to say no, I don't think so. And I use this analogy, and we're really going to focus in on why high performance culture can bend that cost curve. But the analogy is to look at a race car. Do you ever think of it as giving in to the needs of the race car by paying a lot of attention to it, by giving it special maintenance, by bringing it in off the track on regular intervals for maintenance and tires, and then, you know, after the race, we're going to actually make sure that we cool that engine down all the way so that we can change the oil, so that we can go over it, update it, make sure it's ready to race tomorrow? Well, no. I mean, it's a race car. We know we have to maintain it. We know we need a specialist caring for that engine. If it doesn't have all the parts working just right, it's not going to perform very well. When we provide its needs, it actually performs extraordinarily well. That's why it's a race car. So what's that look like with people? If we give them what we need, if we really focus on the high performance people, what is the payoff? And here, let's take a look at productivity. What is the difference in the productivity of high performers versus average performers? So a very big study was done, and they found pretty amazing results. We're going to challenge that in a second. But before I skip ahead, what do you think it is? Do you think high performers outperform average performers by 25, 75, 200%? We know it's more than 10%. Well, it turns out the study found it was 400%. But if you looked in, there was some data in there that was a little suspicious. And particularly, there were athletes and actors included in this particular study. That concerned me. I just thought, my goodness, if we're somehow basing it based on their revenue contribution or something like that, they might be driving huge deltas in this data. So McKinsey did another study. And what they focused on was, what is the difference in the performance of high-performing complex workers? And complex modern workers are people who deal with people, they deal with information, they might deal with technology, and they found out the delta was even bigger. If 4x wasn't enough, what McKinsey found is it was 8 to 12 times the productivity of your average performer. Huge opportunities. And I'm not saying this is going to be true for every single person in every single role in every single company. It doesn't have to be. If that is the big delta in strategic roles, we need to really think about making sure we have high performers in our strategic roles. Here's an example. If I'm putting together a cross-functional initiative, I don't care if your company is 3 people, 5 people, 10 people, or 1,000 people. When we need to get something that needs to get done and it involves multiple people from multiple teams, what would happen if you elevated just a quarter of the team members to high performers? If you're assuming just that 4x multiple, you could cut that 3-year project down to 2. If the high performers were even more productive than that, if you take the 8x multiple that McKinsey suggests, you might cut that project down to 1 year. And then if you're one of those people that says, I just don't buy that. You know, I don't know those McKinsey people and how they're measuring things. I haven't seen that here. So we're going to continue with our 3-year project. It'll take the time it takes. We'll get our product out. We'll update our service or our software or whatever it is. Well, imagine what happens if your competition does believe this, and it is true. And the competition sees what you're doing or hears about it, or maybe hires one of your people. They can start 1 to 2 years later than you and still beat you to the market. Really important that we think about calibrating our culture to high performance. So where do you find these high achievers? Often, when we talk about creating high performance culture, we talk about selecting top talent, we talk about retaining top talent. People are like, okay, so where do I find the top talent? What is the secret? Because those are people that are hard to find. And I've got some good news. They're probably right in front of you. I want to assert that all people want to achieve. They may not act like it. They may not be achieving right now. But nobody comes to work to fail. Nobody comes trying to blow up their job. It does not exist. Even your biggest misbehaviors are usually well-intended. It is usually the result of some sort of blind spot. And if we look at this through the history of the lens of some history here, and we take a look at what did Abraham Maslow say, he said people have a hierarchy of needs. And so their need to achieve their potential just may not have been revealed yet because they've got lower level needs that have not been met. And so we can't expect people to show up and say, like, I want to get better. I want to get better. I want to improve my skills. I want to become the top performing salesperson or the top performing customer service agent or whatever, if they're struggling in their life, if they don't feel safe, if they don't feel cared for. Those needs may not emerge. Well, something interesting I found was that Maslow even came back and said, there's something above achieving your potential. And if you do this, if you take care of someone to the point that they feel safe and cared for, they feel like they belong, they are trying to achieve, even if they're achieving beyond anything they've ever experienced before, there is still another need. And that need is for it to matter. People need their work to matter. He called it self-transcendence. He put it above the pyramid. To my knowledge, I don't think it was published. This was something you can learn about it online, but the book that he put out there and wrote about the hierarchy of needs was all about these first 5 levels. And so adding this thing is really insightful for me as a leader, thinking, how do we get people orienting towards goals and serving others? And who's like that? Who has a servant's heart? Yeah, you say, well, some people, no, actually, they all do. It just might be buried by some of their other needs. So here was some more data that bears this out. And it was by Hertzberg. It was a study of studies. And so this was over many, many years. They took a look at what do we find drives extreme satisfaction at work? And what do we find drives extreme dissatisfaction at work? And it turns out the #1 driver of extreme satisfaction at work is achievement. Everybody wants to be successful. And so I just want to pause for a second. If you're looking at this and you're saying, wow, salary is way down the list, it doesn't seem to make people very happy. It doesn't seem to make them very unhappy. So I think we can actually postpone our comp increases or our merit and rewards reviews. Like, not so fast. When you don't pay people fairly, I believe that's what's showing up under policy administration and supervision. When people feel like the rewards are unfair for the work they're doing, they can be extremely upset, even if they're achieving. So don't be surprised. You lose a high-performing, high achiever. You're recognizing that person. You're praising that person. You're trying to give them the best work to do. And they leave. It's because this data says you can be extremely satisfied and extremely dissatisfied at the same time. So we need to ask our people, what are the things that we do, unintentionally or intentionally, that drive you nuts? What are some things that bother you here? What could we fix? What is a dumb rule that frustrates you? Just keep in mind, they probably won't thank you for it. The reality is when we take care of these hygiene factors, they call it, the extrinsic things that are broken in our company, we fix them, they're not happy. They're just not mad anymore. So we've got to do those things so they're not mad, and then we've got to lean into how do we help people achieve so that they can experience that extreme satisfaction. We have to do both. Leadership is not so simple as a silver bullet. Some more insights on this. If you haven't read Dan Pink's book, Drive, I think it is phenomenal. And it has lots of studies in it that take a look at how does just the desire to do something for the sake of doing it affect our drive, our motivation. It turns out intrinsic motivation is largely geared on purpose, autonomy, and mastery. Again, it kind of ties back to Maslow. These things aren't going to really show up until their needs are met, but we can't think we can pay people enough to stay in our company. We just have to pay them enough so that they're not mad about staying in our company. And then we got to lean into how do we help them achieve more. This is the view that I think a lot of leaders get frustrated by. They're like, gosh, people are just so needy. They're never happy with their wages. If I asked them how I could help them, of course, everyone's going to say pay them more. But when I look at a scene like this, and I really look at this, the signs, what I see is people saying, I'm scared. I don't think things are fair. I'm worried my job might go away. I don't know if I can take care of my family. I don't know if I can keep up with the cost of living. And there's a lot of data to really bear that out. So when you're not seeing people goal-oriented, you're not seeing them focused on the needs of others, you're not seeing them want to get better, the clue is we need to go looking at what's going on in their safety, belonging, and their basic needs. And so that is a little clue. We're going to look ahead at what are the solutions to creating a high-performance work environment. The number one thing, we've got to make sure that people are healthy. All right, so what is the condition of the U.S. labor force right now? Well, it's not healthy. It is a dumpster fire. We've got burnout, like a wildfire, just creeping sort of out of control. The majority of employees are disengaged, and the majority of them are broke. That's not a really good foundation for Maslow to build on. So not super surprised that a lot of people are not all fired up about achieving their potential. They are stressed. So we're seeing, this 6% unsustainable stress, 23% experiencing high stress, 39% moderate stress. And then we asked, what do you think is stressing people? And this was a response to the audience. I encourage you to think about this for yourself. What do you think is driving the most stress in people's lives? And I think our audience got this right. That's what happens. You pull a bunch of HR leaders together that know what's going on with their people. They're stressed about money. They're stressed about their health. They're stressed about the work environment. And does that show up at home? Absolutely it does. But look, it's not even close. The data shows people's money concerns are way out front. Now, work shows up second, but that's only because health is broken into mental and physical. You put those together, they're a solid second. I would say this is why One Digital is so focused in these three areas. We want to make sure that we are fighting for people's health and success and financial security because it matters and it's keeping them from doing their best work. We also asked the audience, do you think low earners are experiencing more stress or high earners? Curious what you think. Now, it turns out it's pretty evenly distributed, but it does skew towards our higher earners. Now, it might be because that's who was in the room, and they're like, oh, look, I can only tell you from my point of view, I'm feeling a lot of stress. Couple ways to look at this data. One is nobody is not stressed. Number two is the stress does not go down just because you make more money. More money, possibly more problems, more responsibility, more pressure, more overload, but it does not make you immune from stress. This is an equal opportunity situation. These were a couple of the facts that we talked about. 63% of employers report workplace stress is causing problems at home. So we saw those other factors on there like home or their love life or those kind of things. Yeah, it comes home with us. And then if it's at home, it comes to work with us. Half of employers are saying they could use some help with figuring out how do I manage stress. 46% saying they're stressed about the amount of work they have to complete. Now, these are smaller numbers, but they're pretty serious. People saying, I think I'm experiencing burnout, or I have cried at work about the work-related stress in my life. If that was 1 in 4, and you pull any meeting together of your team, that's somebody on your team. If you haven't seen the mental health stats of the last couple of years, same thing. 20% of employees are in a mental health crisis. Most of us are experiencing a lot of stress. 1 in 5 is in a crisis. This is another look, and I'm sorry, I'll move on from the stats here in a second, but this was just how people feel. So did you experience the following feelings during a lot of the day yesterday? So really current. Stress, worry, anger, sadness. not a lot of people probably coming to work thinking about self-actualizing or self-transcending. They are struggling at the bottom of the pyramid. It's showing up in their physical health as well. We can look back now 40 years since we suddenly hit that inflection point where obesity started taking off, and it's not getting better. So within the next few years, we're looking at over half the country having obesity. It's getting to our children. The stress is in our house. It's how we're behaving. It's how we're raising our kids. And unfortunately, this says almost 60% of 2-year-olds, almost 60% of 2-year-olds are expected to have obesity by the time they're 35. So let's go back to work. How's engagement going? Not good. And a lot of talk is about whether it's up a point, down a point. Well, in the last 2 years, it's gone down 2 points, each of the last 2 years. Gallup is writing about this. They're sending off the alarms are going off. Back up. Get to the back of the room. Look at this slide over the course of 20 years and say, what's going on? It's flat and it's low. So forget whether it's 36, 35, 34, 32, 31. If it goes back up next quarter and it goes 32, 33, great, we turned a corner. Is that really great? 2/3 of people are not engaged at work. They are there stressed, trying to make ends meet, and concerned about their money, concerned about their health, concerned about their family. So using our racing example, I would say that the race cars are on fire. And if we go look to the leaders to put them out, the leaders are on fire too. This is not really a recipe for growing your business. And I want to suggest that you look at the idea of best work, best life. If you could create a place where people come and they get better, their needs are getting met, the opportunity is there for them to get better, to contribute to something beyond themselves, you can transform the workplace from the problem into the solution. This is where we spend most of our time. And if it's making us healthier, you have the potential to not only get that high performance multiple on the productivity of your people, but attract people like crazy because they're not getting it out there. How's the competition doing? Well, this is actually directly from the War for Talent. So this is dated, but this is what it looked like in the Fortune 500. And you might say, well, I'm not a Fortune 500 company. They have all the money and all the people in the world. Yeah, and they don't know how to do talent either. Look at these results. Fortune 500 executives, this is 10 years ago. And right now I'm waiting for McKinsey to kick in and give us updated data, but we're just not seeing dramatic improvements. So even back then, they did not know how to find top talent. They didn't know how to keep it. They didn't know how to develop it. So getting bigger is not just going to suddenly solve this problem. This is a huge opportunity for all of us. If nothing else, I just want you to think about what could happen in your company if more of your people were achieving, if more of your people felt safe, and how could we help do that? So here's our 4 suggestions. This is how I believe you build a destination employer. And the first part is you need an aspiration. You need something that people understand our work is doing beyond making money. How is our work contributing to a better place? How is our work contributing to improving the lives of other people? At One Digital, we just say it really simply. Our business exists to improve the lives of millions of people. We want more people to experience best work, best life. These things should not change. But if your people don't know what they are, you've got some work to do. So make sure that these foundational things are there. Next, I'd say talent strategy. We need to connect our people needs to our business needs. So what is the vision of the company? Where is it headed over the next few years? How are you going to get there? What are the key moves you're making as a business? And then how does that translate into your customer and employee value proposition? How does that translate into who do you need over the next few years to achieve those kind of results? Then we've got our people practices. This is the part that us in HR or talent, we love because this is how we do everything. Well, it does need to be excellent, and we need to really embrace the entire talent life cycle. We need to get good from the beginning of the relationship all the way to the end. The biggest thing I would say here, the biggest opportunity, if it's not onboarding is huge, by the way, huge opportunity. If you are not world-class at onboarding, you're missing out. The next biggest opportunity that might even be bigger is offboarding. When people leave your organization, and they all will, They'll all leave someday. If you don't plan for that experience to be a positive one, regardless of their performance, they could be blowing you up for the rest of their lives and into eternity. Because I guarantee you, if you've ever been fired or you ever feel disrespected by a company, you're taking that message home. Your wife knows it, your husband knows it, your partner knows it, your kids know it, your parents know it, your neighbors know it. And when there's a war for talent on, you cannot afford to have terrorists out there blowing you up for the next 30 years. You need to figure out how to transition people out of your company and into whatever their preferred future is without burning that bridge. Final piece, we talked about it earlier, is we've got to have organizational health. And high performance is built on trust. It's built on safety. People will not consistently give you discretionary effort and go outside their comfort zone to get better if they don't feel safe doing it. So we ask the audience, where do you think you start? And immediately answer from the back of the room, organizational health. I totally agree. Forget your goals for a second as a company and realize if our race cars are on fire, we need to put them out before we put them back on the track. Organizational health has got to come first. Then, as they catch a breath, give them something really meaningful to look forward to. Give them something that helps them lock in and realize our work really matters here. We are doing something that matters. I would say, second, shore up that aspiration. If you can get the bookends, if you can get people at least healthy enough to come in wanting to do great work, you buy yourself time to do the middle two. And so getting a coherent strategy, working continuously on improving your people processes, those are the things that are going to cause you to go from good to great. And I really orient it in terms of a bit of a pyramid, because I do think it's worth noting, you don't have to constantly change all this stuff. We need to get our foundation of organizational health in place. And we need to practice that every day. We need to get really clear on our aspiration, and we need to not change it. For once, people need to know that we're not changing something. We're changing things all the time. But what is the thing we're not changing? It's your why. That buys you the time to dig in to your strategy and your practices. Here are some samples of practices. Ultimately, I also include in here a sample of what are the metrics that really matter. And I believe often we're measuring a lot of things, but we're sometimes missing which are the metrics that matter, which ones drive our economics, and things like employee engagement and turnover are huge. All right, so at this point, we went to takeaways. These were the questions that we shared. One was, which area at your business needs the most work? Thought it was very interesting. Aspiration came in first. We need to clarify why we're in business beyond making money, and we need our people to understand what that is. Second one was organizational health. And as we did this, they just went back and forth, back and forth. It was organizational health, aspiration, then it was aspiration, organizational health. And I would tell you, whichever order you tackle in, we got to do them both. That will buy us the time to work on the other stuff. We actually asked, what are you going to tackle? What was a takeaway from this presentation that you would actually go put in place in the next 30 days? These were some of the examples. Working on our EVP, working on clarity, putting more care into our work, creating that 30-second elevator pitch. I would tell you yes, 30 seconds is good, but you need the less than 10-word version. Ours is 4 words. You're welcome to borrow it. Best work, best life. That is our promise. We also tell people, look, if you're going after best and best, it's going to be hard. I will promise you a challenging job, because we're going to pursue your best work and best life. Something in there has got to become clear why they should come work for you. What are they going to get? Not just what are they going to give. A few other things in here: work on organizational health, work on financial literacy. My goodness, when we see those stats, really hard. What do we need people doing in order to have a healthy body? They need to sleep. They need to exercise. They need to have positive relationships. They need to fuel themselves. Hard to do when you're on fire financially. So helping people understand, how do we live within our means? How do we fight back all the consumerism messaging that's coming at us all the time about how we could get another loan, we could get another thing on our credit card, we can get more points. We need to get back maybe a little bit to the layaway model, which is save up and you can have anything you want. I also asked a BHAG question. If you're not familiar with BHAG, this is the idea of a big, hairy, audacious goal. It's made popular by Jim Collins in his best-selling book, Good to Great. But what is a major move? A thing you don't even know how you'd accomplish it, but in the next year, if we could move the needle in this big area, it could be a game changer for us. And so here were some of the things that people said. Showcasing our culture, showing the success of our work, identifying high performance qualities, creating a model. What does good look like? How do we help our people pursue that high performance at work and at home, I would add? Help the company get recognition and credit for what we're already doing. Yes, if you are not pursuing a Best Place to Work award, you're missing a huge opportunity, because those awards, even if you don't win, help you get better. They send a strong message to your people. We're working on this. We care. And then when you do win, which you will if you stay at it, then you become a high-performing, award-winning place to work. You've got whole new ammunition for drawing talent to your business. So several more things in here. A lot about clarity. Clarity is huge. A few more focus strategies on management growth and mentoring. Nothing will change your culture like growing your leaders. I can tell you that's an area we're really focused on. We have got to grow our leaders. Focus on health and wellness, help employees achieve their goals, create more community at work. All these things are awesome. And I'll tell you the other thing is really good news is a lot of these things don't cost a lot of money. They require intention more than they require budget. So one of the things we talked about in the room, I encourage people, if you're not sure I've got the budget for training, that's okay. You can get to training. Here's a wonderful first step. Do development. Training is part of development, but just focus on, are people growing? If we were to have a conversation, do they have a goal? Do they have a professional goal? Do they have a personal goal? By the way, I really believe even if they're achieving in their personal life, if that is because they have more positive relationships at work and it's showing up in how they're exercising or how they're taking care of their family or how they're saving, those things are going to get attributed back to engagement at work. So developing your people does not have to be expensive. That could be a book club. That could be a monthly conversation, a coaching conversation. You buy somebody a cup of coffee. There's so much we can do on the development side. I have a whole other talk on just that. So reach out to me if you're interested. The title of that one is Forget Retaining Your People, Grow Them. Talent retention is very expensive and rarely as successful as we'd like it to be. Growing people is cheap and it works wonders. So take a look at that. Actually, and that's kind of where I'm going to wrap up. So I'll get myself out of the way in case you want to use QR codes. These are a variety of the topics that I often speak and coach and train on. Things around talent strategy, leadership development, and employee engagement. How do we help build high-performance work environments, but also high-performance people? If any of this interests you, please connect with me on LinkedIn. That's the first QR code. If there's anything I can do for you, you're welcome to send me an email. That will happen with the second QR code. And beyond that, let's see, I think we had a couple more slides in the back. Oh, there was an eval. Certainly, if you'd like to take this, I welcome your feedback. If you found this webinar helpful. And then we took a quiz. The quiz was for a nice gift. So if you didn't come, you missed out on a great gift. And that's it. All right. If you do want the slides, reach out to me. I'll send you the slides. The slides in the appendix include even more stats. So if you are a stats maniac and I didn't give you enough, there are more. I'd say whatever it takes. Whatever it takes, speak about the future and the growth and the goals of your company. And even if you don't care about people, all you care about is how do we grow? How do we hit our financial numbers? I would encourage you to care about your people. It is a wonderful strategy for doing both. So thanks so much. Appreciate your attention and hope to see you at a future event.